Welcome everybody to another live expert Q&A with Louis Grenier, founder and host of Everyone Hates Marketer. My name is Ramley John, managing director here at Product Led, and today we'll be talking about how to radically stand out from competition. So if you have any questions, comments, just leave that below. I'd love to also know where you're tuning in from. This is an interactive one, so if you have any questions, I could actually pop it up to Louis. How's it going, Louis? How are things with you today?
Bonjour, bonjour. Delighted to be here to debate with you, say a few jokes. But yeah, and if anything, I'm just super stoked because I really, as I said to you off air, I have a huge admiration for what you've built with Westbush. And yeah, let's get in.
Yeah, let's jump in. So, I mean, radical differentiation. Why? Like, it sounds like you're putting your flag down on this topic. Why this, of all things that you can probably rant about and really get passionate about and worked up about, Louis? Why radical differentiation, and why is it so important to you?
So the term radical differentiation is not mine. It came from Marty Neumeyer, who's a positioning expert who wrote a book called Zag, and he came up with this beautiful term a few years ago, and I just really much, connected with it in a lot of ways. And this question is important because when I started the podcast, Everyone Hates Marketers, I've always been kind of fighting marketing bullshit as a whole. The entire kind of thinking about it and talking to a lot of people who believe in what I believed, but I felt there was something missing between the why and the how. Like I was saying, we're fighting marketing bullshit, but there was no, apart from a few advice, a very tactical how to do it, there was no thread. There was no thing that linked this is marketing bullshit and this is how to fight it. And so it took me years to come to the answer. Radical differentiation is what I believe in the most. I believe it's the best way to fight marketing bullshit because it's about identifying a group of people you can obsess about, building a product that solves one of their pain, and help them reach one of their goals super, super well. And being able to claim that you're the only one doing it. And by using this formula, like being the only one in that category that does this or that group of people, you can basically grow and become number one in the market and then grow up and up and up. And that's nothing new again, like that's marketing 101. But I didn't see myself leaving my job and going full-time again, building my business and say, hey, I'm a marketing consultant and I fight marketing bullshit. It just was missing the spiciness. It was missing the spice, the edge, and I felt the need to go very deep in one specific thing, which in a very meta way is also the very core of what radical differentiation is about. And just I'll finish on this. What you've built with Westbush, what Westbush started a few years ago, is exactly this. You nailed a very, very specific small problem. I mean, it's small in terms of impact, but very specific thing. Product-led growth wasn't new. It was coined by others before. But you went all in, took the risk to go all in, wrote a book on a topic, have a podcast on it, a community. And so you can go super, super deep. And now you're the number one. And you could also say you're almost the only. And maybe in the future, you can go to other subjects that are related to it. But now you've cornered that market and you can make, and you will make, and you are already making millions on it.
I'm sure that as Wes is listening to this, that he really like hear this.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, did I lose you there?
You were back a few seconds ago already.
1 second. There. Sorry about that. For technical difficulties, I think my internet. I was just saying that. Thank you for your kind words. I know Westbush appreciates that. I appreciate that as well. I mean, you were talking a little bit about marketing bullshit. What is that particularly like? Obviously it's when you see it, it's clear. Like that's bull. But like, what does it look like? Taste like? What does it smell like? What is what does marketing bullshit is for you? So that you can fight that enemy. Like, what does your enemy look like particularly, so that you can make sure to aim at it directly.
Well, it's anything that you wouldn't do to your mom. It's anything that you wouldn't send to your own mom or to your own friends. It's something that you feel that you might do and that you regret later. But overall, it's something that is quite personal for everyone, in a sense that you understand it intuitively. I don't need to describe its features, because you know what it means. The most important aspect of this enemy is to explain why it's there. The reason why it's there is because of the system, in a sense, that is forcing a lot of marketers and founders to be under massive short-term pressure to deliver results, and being surrounded by advice that are not good advice, because they are not rooted in first principles. They're not rooted in fundamentals. And what happens then is, because you're so much under pressure and you hear bullshit advice everywhere, you feel like this is the only way and you have to do it. And so I don't blame people for doing it, honestly. I don't blame marketers and founders who have to use so-called growth hacks and trying to like send an email to a list that hasn't opted in, or lying, like saying that their product is good and does this thing when it doesn't. I really don't blame you if you listen to this and do it, because I understand that you're not doing it for pleasure of it, because you're under pressure. And so the mission behind Everyone Hates Marketers and fighting the bullshit and teaching radical differentiation is to give people a way out and say, hey, you can generate results and do good. It just takes a bit of process and some risk, or at least thinking that it's risky. But then once you do it, you can fight it, and it's actually feels good as well.
Really interesting. I mean, this is such a big topic, especially for product-led companies where so much competition. Like, talk about like scheduling apps. There's so many scheduling apps now. Talk about email apps, like all these apps, especially with product-led. It's and the ease of no code. There's a ton of competition. So you've talked about formula and process and first principle. Louis, can you share with the folks who are tuning in today, what somebody comes up to you, I'm doing marketing bullshit, Louis, help me out. Where do I start? Please save my save my brand or save my business. Where should they start with radically standing out from competition?
So the first step is to start with your self-limiting beliefs. There's a few that comes in quite often about the mindset. So you've nailed the problem. The problem is obscurity. There's so much competition out there. Everyone with a brain and a laptop and an internet connection can basically start something tomorrow and compete with you. So the thinking that doing average things for average people, like Seth Godin would put it, would work doesn't work anymore. It's just over. So you need to fight obscurity, and to fight obscurity, you need to challenge your belief. The biggest one being, I can't take risk. Doing this is too risky. But I would say that the only safe way now out there is to take some risk, is to actually do something, go all the way in, and do something that you feel is a bit difficult, that gives you butterfly in your stomach. So that's the first thing. There's a few others about imposter syndrome and anxiety and whatnot, but it's really a mental challenge first before being a process challenge. The second thing then is to obsess over your minimum viable market. I don't mean a group of people that is too small to sustain you. I mean a group of people that you can own and defend, that is small enough for you to own and defend, and big enough for you to make money out of in the next 6 to 12 months or 18 months if you want to. And obsessing over a group of people, because that's the biggest mistake I see over and over again. You can't stand out if you try to cover everyone and target everyone. That's just impossible to do. So once you have a very tight definition of your market, you know them inside out, you know their psychographic above demographics or firmographic, you know who they are, what they believe, what they want. Once you have that, then you can move on to the next stage, which is engineering your differentiation, which is looking at the category you're in and trying to identify the things you can challenge that came from interviewing customers. I can give more practical details, but I'll just go over the process briefly. Engineering your differentiation means that you're going to have to take some choices, to make some choices mostly about removing instead of adding. It's about really creating this crisp, congruent experience for people. What are you going to do? What are you not going to do? What behavior are you going to choose to do? What are you going to say? So it's not just about changing your copy and your messaging. It's about engineering your product, engineering the price, your promotion, the message, everything, so that it's congruent to that group of people. And then finally, it's about the jolt, which is about making people pay attention to you in a non-sleazy way. And this process is basically something that is rooted in first principles of marketing and psychology that is never going to change. And if you think about it, if you look at brands that are now famous and have made it, they've all started this way. To break from the noise, I don't see any other way.
So good. I mean, that it sounds so basic, but it's so powerful. I mean, let's go through each of the steps you talked about here. First one is internally self-limiting beliefs. I mean, essentially, especially for companies that have been around, even for startups, the first thing that they have is we've always done it this way. Why should we try to do something different? What's your suggestion for? And this sounds like more like an internal thing where you're trying to do something new, and how do you introduce this internally? How can companies and maybe even founders or people who are listening in, they might be head of marketing or head of product, how can they help their team overcome that self-limiting belief so that they can take the first step to radically standing out?
Well, it's about asking themselves the question, are you happy with where you are? Most people are not. They want more. They want to grow. They want more sales. And then you ask yourself, are you happy with the way it's been going? Are you willing to change some stuff? And it starts from there. So the first one is standing out is risky, and challenging that and thinking counter arguments to it, thinking of campaigns and products that you've noticed and that you've actually bought. Look at the way they've done it. The second one is like this fear of focusing on specific opportunities, specific market, specific product, specific pain is going to limit your opportunities. And again, that's something that can be solved by just thinking about it more, which is when you have a heart problem, you don't go see your GP, you go see the heart surgeon. People trust specialists, people trust products that do that one thing very well for them. And unless you're a massive brand with a massive market share where the laws of business are changing, then you have to stick to something tiny. And the third one is the fraud imposter syndrome thing. And again, you need to find arguments to the contrary. Everyone is making them up making it up as they go. David Bowie, amongst many other artists, have said that they felt imposter syndrome all the time. This is normal. So you have only two choices in business. You either exist or you grow. What are you gonna do? Let's fucking go. Life is short, right? Let's try something. Let's fucking go all the way in one specific aspect and see what happens. And if you ask for too much feedback internally before shipping something, if you decide by committee, if you remove the spice out of the curry so that it's palatable for everyone, then you're going to stay average and you're just going to fight obscurity, and it's going to be very difficult. So it's an intuitive. Everyone gets that intuitively. I don't need to explain that for too long. But the work of working on your mental health, your beliefs, can be done with a coach, with therapists, with business coaches who've done it before, looking at examples around you. There's a few angles, but usually it's the same solution, which is challenging them and going for it.
It's so good. I really, and going back to Seth Godin, I've been reading his book, The Practice, and that's one of the things he said as well is when you're doing great work, you feel like an imposter. And Seth Godin even said he feels like an imposter all the time, which this guy's like a best-selling author of 9 books, world-renowned speaker, saying in his book that he feels like an imposter. And I love what you're saying, is that to radically stand out, you need to feel like an imposter. And if you don't, that means you're probably following along with the crowd. Most likely
too safe.
Business. Yeah,
too safe. That's all. So it's and exactly, Seth Godin is another example. There's so many, and it would be, no one is born as a baby knowing how to be a CEO. Like Wes Bush wasn't born knowing how to lead the PhD Institute. You're not born knowing how to run a fucking podcast. You learn on the go, and the only choice we have as human is to try a new thing, seeing how it goes. If it worked, great, let's do more. If it failed, let's do something like else. That's the only thing we can control. Right. So, and when I'm saying that to you, I'm saying that to myself, man, as because it's an ongoing battle. There is no here and there, there is no, when I'm successful, I think differently. No, you'll be the same person. So you might as well enjoy the ride and just deal with that constant chess game between yourself and yourself, in a sense.
And applying this to companies now, maybe that's why a lot of like SaaS companies website look very similar, is because when you stand out, you are putting yourself up for criticism. Would you say that? Like, what what's your commentary on all the SaaS website looking the same, and why is that happening? And how do you help them stand out from? We're talking about internal as a person now, but like, how can companies like overcome that organizational self limiting belief?
So I can't really comment on that aspect of those websites looking the same, because that might be fine. Because
Mm,
it's radical differentiation doesn't mean that you need to do everything differently from the rest.
mm,
It means being the only choice for in that category for that group of
mm.
people doing that specific thing. And so if you have a very simple website that follows some common patterns, and that's not the way you're going to radically stand out, then I think it's fine, as long as your value, the proposition that you give to the
Right.
specific group, is unique to you. And that's the thing. It's like, I'm not preaching for everyone to go crazy and do everything differently. It's deeper than that. It's about, as long as you understand your market very well and are able to claim that you're the only one doing that thing this way, solving that pain this way, being the best answer for that group of people, then by all means keep a simple website. There is an argument to say that actually, if you go too far, you might actually fuck up with people internal structure of
Right.
um, of what they're expecting a SaaS website to be. So it's like, you know, it depends what you want, but most of the time, and that's a cliche, or that's something that people don't understand that necessarily about differentiation, is that you don't have to go all the way differently in every aspect in your messaging or whatever. It doesn't need to go that far.
Mm. So good. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, so that's a first step in the process you talked about. The second step is identifying. You've already been talking a little bit about this. That core group of people that really give a shit about what you're doing. How do you
Yes.
help? Like, how do you help companies figure that out? Because you're right. All too often, they're targeting such a wide segment that you're talking more about like maybe not going micro niche, but like going hyper focus on a specific segment.
Yeah. So niching down or picking a specific segment is also misinterpreted. So when I talk about picking this minimum viable market, it doesn't mean you need to pick to only focus on product managers or to only focus on a specific industry. It's a bit wider than that. It's about identifying a group of people and asking yourself the question: are there any differences in the market that you might be able to take advantage of? Is there an underserved audience that you can take advantage of? And so the minimal viable market is basically that. So in April Dunford book, she talks about identifying your best customers. Pretty much everyone is agreeing on that aspect. I would challenge it a bit, saying that yes, you should start with your best customers, but not necessarily in terms of money. Meaning, don't necessarily focus on the ones that spend the most with you, because that might not be the audience and the minimum viable market you want to go after, because maybe this audience is very well served already. So there's other aspect to look into. Access, do you have access to more? Joy, do you enjoy working with them?
Mm,
And pain, are they in massive pain, or is it like so pain, right? So using those parameters to pick the group and looking at patterns. What do they have in common? Why are they so into this? If you don't have a product and you're listening to this right now, looking and interviewing and talking to people who've bought a product that is similar to yours to understand why they picked this one and what was the kind of the thinking behind it and the pain they wanted to solve and all of that is also a good way. Looking at your own experience, but it takes a bit of taste and experience to get to a point where you have this nailed down to a T. So let me just give you a quick example, because the
mm,
advice then is to interview them, right? Is to ask them
right.
the questions such as, what happened the very first time you ever thought about buying a solution like ours? How did you go about researching it? Why did you pick us above the others? What other solutions did you look into compared to us? What almost stopped you from buying? Those questions that are kind of generic questions that everyone in the space would talk about. We talked of air, like about Claire Sulentrop, G.R. Lodi, Asia Matos. I mean, we all speak the same language. It's all behind jobs to be done and whatever. So it's the same thing. But the core thing then that I teach is, once you have that, you need to identify a group that is congruent, that you can really serve and double down on. So quick example, I work with a shampoo company. They're producing shampoo specifically for Latinas. And they thought that their minimum viable market were Latinas. And I challenge them to
Mm.
say, no, not now, not yet. It's too early.
Mm.
You're too small. You need
Right.
to go more focused. They talk to a lot of customers. We identified and discovered that the ones that really cared and loved the shampoo the most were Latinas living in California
Interesting.
and Florida with long hair and frizzy hair that they had a struggle to control. And so, and they were living in those warm states, humid states that even made the freeze even worse. And so, boom, you can see now you have something, you have a market that is very specific with enough people to dominate. And then once you have make enough money out of this market, then you can
Mm.
branch out and do more stuff. So that's kind of the core of it. And it takes a bit of taste and experience, but you can't afford to go too wide. And
Mm.
usually the fear is, but we want our total addressable market to be super big because we want to make millions. Sure, you do that later, but one step at a fucking time.
Right.
Obsess over that group for 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Be the best possible answer for them. Reach to the early adopters, and then things will like gradually grow from there.
And just to add to this, I mean, those people who really care about that product now can become your evangelists. They can give you testimonials. They can go to talk show. They can tell their friends about it. I mean, what are some of the other benefits that like for people who are still they have the founders like saying we need to go wider and because we need a bigger addressable market. What are some other things that you can share? Like, what are some other benefits of really like being hyper focused on that one small minimum viable market?
Well, more money, they'll be willing to pay more because they feel it's ready for them. Word of mouth between people that know each other very well. Once you identify the right group, people will know each other and they'll be able to spread further. It's using the basic adoption curve that you've all seen, the before the early adopters, like the very, very first people, then early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggers. And so that's how it works for everything. Like, don't expect to try to reach the majority straight away. You can't do it. It's just those people need much more trust. So it's frankly, if you need more proof, it's just the only way it works scientifically, physiologically. Um, People buy from others, and any product that have been successful, I've worked the same way. And I'm not going to go into like the basic Facebook case study example starting in university, but that's what it is, man. It's the
Mm.
same thing for every product out there, but we have a tendency to forget the beginnings to look at where they are now. And that's the big mistake. Look at the way Red Bull has started. They were only selling to rich Austrians hanging out in ski resorts. That's where they were doing. They were selling to those people who had money, who were partying all night, who really wanted something to give them energy. That's how they were selling to.
Mm. That's so good. And you were talking about it. It comes with instinct to find that small niche. Like, do you have any other tips, like for figuring out that minimum viable market that people are like, okay, yes, Louis, I'm bought in. I understand word of mouth, more money, adoption curve. Help me find my minimum viable market. Like, where do I start and where do I go to figure that out particularly?
Well, you look into your customer list, you talk to your customer facing staff, to your sales staff, to your customer success staff, to anyone who has direct access to customers. You get access to maybe trend report if you want to. But the beauty of talking to customers directly will give you this certainty. Like, unless you do that exercise, you will never have certainty. Once you have the certainty, you know who you're targeting, because so many people who don't know each other have told you the same thing. And I would argue that you'll never have perfect data. So
Mm.
maybe you might miss out on one insight, but by doing this work, you'll have most of it, most of the data. And the game is speed above overly thinking about it for 9 months. Don't think about it for that long. Do your work. Have a standard that says, okay, we've reached it. Now let's fucking go. Let's commit, because that's the best thing we have right now. Let's execute the fuck out of it for a consistent period of time, like 6 to 9 months. And then let's look back and see what happened. But there is this tendency, because we're afraid, and I understand there's pressure to do another research and pay another company to do research,
Yeah.
and but no, you have to fucking, at the end of the day, you have to commit. You have to commit because you've done the work.
Mm. So good. I really love that. Like, looking at the data and just commit, just go with it and just see what the data looks like after. I mean, so now I'm going through your process and I'm trying to recall. The first is overcome self-limiting beliefs to radically stand out. Second is to figure out the minimum viable market, and the third, that I, if I recall correctly, is engineering uniqueness, and that comes to your product, your marketing. Everything has to be engineered for uniqueness. Can you talk a little bit more about like how, you've, whether you've helped somebody in the past or how you can help companies right now who are tuning in to engineer that uniqueness once they figure out that particular minimum viable market?
So once you have a market, you have a series of Lego bricks, I call them, that you've collected throughout. So you understand the channels they spend time on. You understand what they think you're, why they think you're unique, why they think you are unique. You understand their cliche, which is a question that I haven't mentioned that is very powerful, which is you ask them, what is the number one cliche about our industry or category that you hate? Like, let's say if you're Salesforce and you sell a CRM software, you would ask them, what do you hate the most about CRM softwares? And that's a Lego brick that I reuse. So you basically collect all of those insights in one place, collect your minimum viable market, the cliches, what they think you're unique, how they found out about you, the biggest pain, why, why are they really into you, and why do they buy your product? What made them tick and say, yes, I need to buy it right now. You collect all of that, and then you pick a category, you pick the category you're in, and that's sometimes a trick, something that people struggle with, which is you want to make sure you pick the right box, because depending on the box you pick, the context changes, right? People expect a specific thing out of a category. If you say you're a marketing training company, they would expect certain stuff. But if you say that you sell marketing courses, they might expect something different. So picking the right category is important. How did they describe you to a friend is something that you need to ask as well. So you pick that category, and then you look at it from not on terms of the features they offer, but you look at it from the behavior they have. And that's a critical difference. I'm not saying looking at the feature set of the others. I'm saying to look at the behavior overall. What do they say? What do they not say? Where are they? Where are they not? What do they offer? What don't they offer? Like, looking at that from a list perspective, like the typical player in the category, they do all of those things, right? And you look at it from different dimensions, like through different lens, like product, place, price, promotion, across the journey if you want. Like, you're very much aware, like, for example, onboarding. What do they do during onboarding, during the purchase, delivery? Trying to really get into the category as a whole. What do they do, right? And once you have that, you plot it on a graph. You plot the biggest, the ones that you feel have the highest kind of value for people, the ones that are very much something that you can either challenge or double down on. And then you use what Blue Ocean Strategy mentions in their book, which is you try to remove as much as possible out of that and add a few things that double down on your kind of the core thing that you really want to do for that market, right? And so that process can take a long time. You want to go through different lenses. For example, like playing some games, which is like, if I was building a product that is 80% cheaper, what would it look like? Or 10x more expensive, what it would look like? If I had to build a caricature of it, how would it look like? If I had to put it in a cereal box, what would I have to remove? If I made it unboring, like way less boring, what will it look like? It's basically about a game of going into all the way into the edge of the map in different attributes, trying to think the one that is the most congruent between your market, your category, and what you offer.
Really, really fascinating. And I'm guessing you did the same process for your personal brand. And I guess that's a question that somebody has here is from Sahari ask, Louis, who do you see as your arch nemesis? And I'm going to take this a little bit further, Louis, and can you walk us through exactly mapping out those pieces and figuring out exactly where you're going to double down on for everyone hates marketers or any other thing that you're working on?
So, concrete example, the way I've built the podcast, Everyone Hates Marketers, I literally listed down everything I hated about traditional marketing podcasts. That was 4.5 years ago. So at the time in particular, the format was always the same. A long intro where the host will make the guest look good for like 2 minutes, and then they would ask the same question to the guest, talk about yourself for 15 minutes. So you end up at the 20 minutes mark with nothing. Then question after question that have nothing to do with each other, talking about completely different topics, followed by trying to make the guest look good. So the host's entire strategy is to make the guest look good. And so that's what I had to play with. So there's other attributes that I hated, but I didn't really do research in terms of the market. I really just leaned on what I wanted to see. And I removed the shitty intro. I flipped everything on its head by starting not with the guests, but with what they know and asking them so many questions on that topic and grilling them, not really caring about whether or not that would make them look good. What I cared about was the listeners would actually get something out of it. And then at the end, if I was in a good mood, they'll get to talk about themselves a bit. So I challenged a lot of things, including the title. And so that's a contrarian way of doing it. That's one lens you can use, but you don't have to differentiate. You don't have to be contrarian and kind of picking an enemy and going at it this way. You can look at it from different lens that I mentioned. And there's a lot more. I guess the advice here is look at companies that seem to really radically stand out in other industries that don't have to be yours. In fact, they shouldn't be yours. And look at their behavior, trying to mimic their behavior, not their features. Trying to look at the way they say stuff and what they're not saying, what they do and what they don't do, which people forget to check. It's not about what they do. It's about what they're not doing. Like Seth Godin, you mentioned.
Right.
Like, look at what he's not doing. Look at where he's not. He only does a podcast. He writes every day on his blog. He does LinkedIn Live now a bit, and that's about it. What does it say? What does it not say? Like, you can go so far on this.
Interesting. And it goes back. I really love how you say look at companies that are outside your industry as well. Like a lot of B2B companies, they're should be looking at what somebody told me this. Like you should look at what D2C companies are doing in terms of marketing for
Absolutely.
B2Bs and applying it there. I mean,
Like-
let's talk about. Oh, go ahead.
No, I can get started on this. That pisses me off so much. I mean,
Let's go for it. Go on a rant,
the B2B SaaS industry was this fucking bubble where people's mind and brain were like changing and like we're all into this like reinventing the playbook of marketing and psychology and business altogether just because there's a subscription linked to your product. I mean, come on, like look at way outside your industry to get some proper idea. Dave Gerhardt says that all the time and he's completely right. Look at TikTok for like, how do people make others pay attention on TikTok? I'm not saying you should go on TikTok. I'm saying look at the behavior there. What is happening? You know, look at Animals Crossing, like those video games that kids are like all over, like Roblox and fucking Minecraft. What are they doing? What are they not doing? Like, it's time to look beyond your bubble to lean on foundations and marketing principles and psychology principles that will never change.
Really, really interesting. Are you on TikTok?
I'm not on TikTok, but I'm on Reddit, and so therefore I'm on TikTok.
Interesting. I was just curious because you're right, radically standing out. TikTok, their attention span for the teenagers is so small, so that you're right, it really does apply. Yeah, teenagers.
Don't know if they are.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just the way they've been using the content. And sure, like why do you need to spend an hour watching something if in 20 seconds you can get the same thing? If anything, it's just they know where to get the fucking value. Like they don't have time for bullshit, but it doesn't mean they can't read a book that is like 10 hours long if it's super interesting.
Exactly. That's really interesting. A good perspective. In terms of, you talked about TikTok, you talked about Roblox. Are there companies that are for you applying the stuff that you talk about that they're actually radically standing out from competition and doing the stuff that the stuff that you've been talking about in the last half an hour?
Yeah, so I've asked this question actually on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to find the actual. So hold on. There's so many. Let me start somewhere. Let me try to find. I have a full list, but now I can't fucking find it, so I'm gonna have to think about it again. So there's a lot of them that would be called like challenger brands. You've heard that term before, which is the same principle. Like it's by a guy who wrote the book Eating the Big Fish. So there's this brand of water that is fighting against plastic pollution, and that says you don't need. Why are we selling water in fucking plastic bottle, single-use plastic bottle that pollutes the ocean? And they have their single attribute is basically that it's water, but in cans. But they go all the way in, right? It will be a gimmick if they're only selling those in cans, but they go all the way in, like with their messaging and whatever. They say murder your thirst, and they go all the way like in this kind of metal type of imagery. And this is what I mean. They just take one thing and they go all the fucking way. And it's just beautiful to watch. I mean, in another example, like CXL, for example, does it pretty well. They claim to be the space where the top 1% of practitioners like teach to others, and they have super high standard, and so they're able to claim the only spot. So it's not necessarily just something that is like outrageously different that creates radical differentiation. It's just, again, about this intersection. And while you ask me another question, I'm gonna try to find this list to make sure I can give you a bit more.
For sure. I mean, just going back to your point that radical differentiation doesn't mean that you're doing TikTok as a brand. It's about finding that one minimum viable market and actually standing out for them, and for others you might look the same. So I mean, I just want to reiterate that to the folks, that you don't have to wear a wig and put on a clown costume and totally change up your website to radically be different. It's about being different and being the only choice to that particular people who actually care about your product.
Exactly. So, I mean, in a completely different field, because I love to talk about stuff that are completely outside what we do. I don't know if you follow soccer or football for the Europeans. There is this coach called Marcelo Bielsa, who's Argentinian, and he was able to resolve a category paradox by merging two styles of plays that were thought to be impossible to play together. So, in football, it's basically possession or counterattack, basically the two ways to do it. And Bielsa believes in both. So he believes in teams that both has the ball while also being able to play counterattack. And that requires a lot of sacrifice. That requires the team to be extremely fast, physically fucking in shape like you would never believe. So huge commitment, mental commitment from the team as well. But it also means that they're going to get goals scored against them, right? They had to sacrifice that. And that's one of the key ingredients. But yet, this guy is just the idol of so many very good coaches out there, because he believes in that so much. He's going all the way to the edge of the map when it comes to that particular thing, and he's known worldwide to do this. And his team, Leeds United, which plays in the Premier League, is with very, very few dollars compared to the rest of the teams, are like number 7 or number 6, and they play spectacularly. It's just beautiful to watch. So completely different example, but you see the ingredients are always the same. It's like this kind of singular concurrence towards one fucking fight, something that you believe in, that you really want to give to the people.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I don't remember the specific quote, but like somebody asked, "How do you beat Michael Jordan in basketball?" And it says, "Play him in chess instead," or something that you're good at. It's like change the game. If the competitor has a lead over you or has an advantage for you, play a different game. Like totally change up the game is what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, I mean, change like if you have to play the game of capitalism, you can't really change the entire system, but you can play within the rules. You can change the fucking rules. You can or play within the rules and find loopholes and paradoxes and things you can cliches to remove, and doubling down on one thing, and similar lenses like that.
I have another question again from Sahari here. The question is, radically different differentiation means taking a stance. Do you think that people can change their mind, or is it a question of finding people that agree with your stance, or maybe even both?
Well, what do you think?
What do I think? I think it's both. Like whenever somebody asks me either or, I'm usually like the end is there. Like it's first focusing on the people who care, and then once you have momentum, then it's more about changing people's mind, because like it's hard to change people's mind if you're alone. But when you have, I wouldn't want to call it an army, but when you have a team of people who are crazy for you, then you can kind of mobilize them to help you change people's mind about that. And you, what do you think?
Don't know. Am I the guest? Am I the host? I don't fucking know. No, it is incredibly difficult to change people's minds. So at the start, and even I would challenge. I would say that most businesses don't ever need to try to find people who don't believe what they believe, and so that's the trick. find people who believe what you believe. Don't try to change people's
Mm,
mind. Go after people who believe what you believe first, and there is plenty of them already. And so it's
100%.
much easier to sell to them. Like in the product-led growth institute, you don't try to. You know that trying to attract people who don't believe in that approach is a fool's errand. So you focus on people who know and believe internally that like product is everything, and so you start with that. So having said that, there is ways to try to slowly change people's mind. But if you go about it the wrong way, if you go about it saying, do this thing, and I don't care what you think, you're wrong, and change your way and change your behavior, you're fucked. You can't do that. So the way to do it is go about it and take your time. You can give people choice and say, hey, you have the choice. You don't have to go with us. It's up to you. That's one way. Another is to let people create their own options, where you basically say, hey, this is the problem. You don't have any conversions. You struggle with your onboarding. There's plenty of ways to go about it. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? Are you going to, I don't know, like obsess over those users who don't convert and talk to them? Or are you going to do like a product-led growth method or whatever? Another one is to highlight the gap between what they say and what they do. So there's this famous anti-smoking campaign in Thailand years ago, where they actually hired children to have a cigarette and go to someone with a cigarette and say, hey, do you have a lighter? And the adults would always say, all the people that were filmed who would say the same thing. Well, you're too young to smoke. It gives you cancer. Like, it's bad for you. And the kid would then reply with a card that says, if you say that it's that bad for me, why are you smoking then? Or something around those lines. I'm fucking up a bit the script.
I get it.
But by highlighting this gap between what they say and what they do, you also can like jolt people into their habit, outside of the habit. And the last thing is the social proof. And I think that's what you're alluding to. That's what the early majority needs to hear. They are not going to change their mind and their habits and their ways unless they are sure that it's going to work for them. And so they need to see more people doing it. So this is why I talked about the fact that it's a psychological principle of business to start with the early adopters and go above, because the vast majority of people are stuck in their way because of confirmation bias. They only seek information that agree with their point of view, which is why in 2020, Democrats saying to Trump voters, you're wrong to vote for him, was a fool's errand. Instead, you just need to also give them, and that's the last tip, give them an out and say, hey, it's okay that you voted for him. I completely understand. You're in the shit. You're losing your job and whatever. I understand. Now, there might be a better option, so all of those ways are kind of longer term, but you need to start with people who believe what you believe.
100%. And it goes back. I just want to reiterate once again what you said. It's hard to change people's minds. It's hard to change people, period. Right? If they're stuck in what they're doing, it is pretty freaking hard to change them. And that's why habit building is hard, right? Because you're letting go of old stuff. And so going back to that question, go after people who already believe what you believe. Don't try
Yep.
to change people's habits or behavior after you already have
Hey man, can you believe that the big boss is actually watching us right now? How do you feel
it. You
about
see
this?
that?
Like
So
it's like,
Wes, the big boss, is here. He has a question. How do you find a game that's stacked in your favor as a business? So you're maybe competing against Goliath and you're David, or like what would be a suggestion if it's stacked against you?
well, clearly Wes hasn't been listening from the start, has he? Because it's from what we described before, you need to identify a group of people, a difference in the market that you could take advantage of, that the Goliath is not doing, or not doing properly, or not doing as well as you could. And you need to find an opening this way. And it takes a bit of taste and experience, but that's how it starts. You start with the market, obsess over them, find an opening, and then double down on the best fucking way to deliver that thing, solve that pain in this particular way.
Makes a ton of sense. I mean, if anybody has questions, just feel free to drop it in the comments. I mean, one of the things I didn't get a chance to ask you, Louis, is we talked about the three things already. First of all, change your limiting beliefs. Second is to find your minimum viable market. Third is to engineer that differentiation, that uniqueness about you. Can you talk a little bit about how to communicate now that uniqueness? Right, you've identified what is it that you can compete against with your market. How do what are some suggest I'm looking at you right now with your images that you're look like you're screaming. I originally had a different image for this show, and you're like, Ramley, you need to change this because this is too boring. Like, how do you communicate uniqueness once you figure out what you want to be unique on?
Well, it's going to depend on that. So once you have that uniqueness and that single thing that you want to double down on, it's really about, okay, how did we describe it to others so that they get it? How do we make sure that that we repeat it enough so that people understand it? The key, honestly, is repetition, and doubling down on that one thing. People really struggle with that idea of like saying one thing and saying it very well. People have a tendency to use too many things and say, hey, we do this and then we do that and then we do that, because they're afraid that you have one opportunity to like make a good impression. So they say, we do all of those things and we say all of those things. But I would argue, no, double down on that one thing, because you have a higher likelihood that they'll understand and remember you. And then you can introduce more stuff. Like the little secret between us, man, is that radical differentiation is the hook, but I'm doing marketing stuff beyond that, like marketing 101, the same thing that everyone else offers, because it's principles, fundamentals. But my hook is radical differentiation, how to stand the fuck out. And yes, I'm doubling down on it, and I know a thing or two about it now. But that's my hook. That's my lead, right? So that's one thing that people tend to forget. And the other thing is to be on truth. And that's something as well people really tend to fucking forget when it comes to putting your message out there, is what would happen if you actually told the truth? Powerful question. Don't in the job to be done theory, you can really go all the way into why did you buy this drill? Well, to drill a hole in the wall. But why did you need a hole? Because you wanted to hang the painting. And why did you want to hang the painting? Because I wanted my room to look good. And why did you want your room to look good? Well, because I had like a guest coming and I wanted to be seen as someone with high status who has art in his bedroom, in his living room. And so you can go all the way to this kind of ultimate objective. But if you use that in your copy, then it's going to sound fluffy, right? So it's like, stay on truth. Say something real. Say one thing very well, and just double down on that in all your other campaigns, and fucking go all in, and you have more chance to be heard. And I'm afraid that nothing replaces testing that out, right? You need to test it and see if it lands, see if people connect with it. But if you have a very good understanding of your market, it's easier.
I think that's such a good answer. Like, it's obviously you've thought about this, and your responses are well. It's I don't know, right? It's obvious.
You're fucking surprised. You acted like you're
no,
surprised, man.
No, I'm just glad that you're breaking it down so it's easy for people to follow along. But I know I'm about to hit up my time. What's next for you, man? Like, what are things that are coming up for you that, in terms of other people, like things that you are doing that people can check out? This is your time to, I guess, share people what you're up to.
Well, thanks for asking. I mean, the best way is to go to everyonehatesmarketers.com. I'm just obsessing over that topic of radical differentiation for the time being. I teach the topic in an 8-week high-intensity program where I go all the way to the edge of the map in one direction, which is no fucking bullshit. Like, it's intense. I make you do stuff. I make you do assignment in your own business. It's not easy. It's a course that it's a program that people who don't like courses tend to buy, because of that very reason. So that's what I'm obsessing about, learning to stand the fuck out. And if you want to learn more, you just check out Everyone Hates Marketers.
Awesome. Well, if anybody else asks question, I will gather them and see if I can reach out to Louis and get them.
Yeah, sure. Paige has just asked a question there, and I can come back later on that.
For sure. Paige, I'll get you that information for that question. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your time. And Louis, thank you for breaking down your process. I know it takes a lot of energy just going through stuff that you probably already gone through many times with people. So I appreciate your time with us here.
Well, that's my job, man. Thanks so much for you and your work. And I know it's not easy to be a guest and asking questions like you've done. So thank you so much for taking the time. People do take that for granted a bit. And I know it's not easy. So kudos to you.
Thank you.